What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to The Standard. Our guest today is Coach Colby Blaine at the College of Idaho, the men's basketball team. He's three-time Conference Coach of the Year, two-time National Coach of the Year. Last year, his 2023 team won the national championship. They went 36-1. Coach, appreciate you coming on today.
You bet. Looking forward to chatting here.
Man, real quick, what was it like winning the national championship, and what's it like since this year after winning and dealing with all the fame that you're getting now?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Just trying to catch up and get ready for this season. It feels like we just got done yesterday. 2011, worked at College of Southern Idaho. We had a chance to win the national championship there when I was an assistant, so I really got to see kind of the results of that, in terms of getting ready for the next year, in terms of the brotherhood that you develop with the guys and how that story grows. And so to set that goal last year and to achieve it, I kind of knew what was coming, and it's been everything that we've wanted it to be. I think the one cool thing that's really unique about winning your last game is the season never feels like it stops. If you have a loss, you kind of regroup, and that's what drives you forward. But that last win there, it just doesn't feel like it's really stopped. But it's been an exciting last 6 months and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, 36-1. That's crazy, really. 130-18 is your record if you don't count the COVID year. You've only had 6 conference losses. It's been insane, and I've been able to be a part of it for a few years now, which is, man, I can't thank you enough. With you, when did we start exactly? Do you remember?
I think it was going into my second year, so that would have been 2019-20.
Yep.
Which was another team that was on a 25-game win streak, number 1 in the country, got to the national tournament, and COVID canceled the tournament. So
yeah, we won a game there, right?
Yeah.
In North Dakota or South Dakota?
We were in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And won a game, and we were number 1 team in the country, and then they shut us down, huh?
Yeah.
That was crazy. How about, because I know your relationship with the weight room wasn't extremely strong, I'd say, at the beginning, since we've kind of worked together and you knew it was something you needed to get, you needed to add to your program. How's your relationship with the strength and conditioning with men's basketball in particular? How has that changed over the years?
Sure. Well, if there's one thing, I can admit, if there's one thing that I have zero knowledge in terms of being able to lead a program, it's the weight room. If you look at me, I don't spend a lot of time in there, but so it was a place where I knew we needed somebody who could drive us in there. And part of the weight room, yes, is the education on how to lift. Some of it's on nutrition, but it's also to have another leader in there to drive mentality. It's something I'm sure we'll talk about today. Is to be a championship team, you gotta be tough, and you gotta be able to fight through hard times. And the weight room can really put our guys in a controlled environment to learn how to deal with that. And so, to bring you in and to bring off the field in and your whole team, it's changed the game for us. And you've just seen our teams get better and better because they get stronger and stronger, both physically and mentally, over the last couple of years.
Well, like you said, we'll get into it. I've learned more from you and your program. It's had such a huge impact on myself and off the field. So leading with that, something you've been talking about a lot lately is creating a safe place. And talking about that in sports, it's not always talked about. Break that down for me, creating a safe place with your team and your culture.
Yeah, well, we're always trying to figure out how does every team be successful and how do we sustain success? And so through a lot of research, we've kind of come up with 2 things that I think are super important to building a championship team. One is building your mentality, but 2 is creating a safe place. And I think it's not until maybe these last 2 or 3 years that I've really pinpointed why that's important. I think if you look back, we've had a pretty safe environment within our program for a long time, but maybe we didn't necessarily know why. And I think we're really trying to put a why to it now. And I think the important part about creating a safe place is that it's what's going to help you sustain success, right? It gets you the most authentic results. And so over the last maybe year or 2, we've really dove into how do we actually create that. And there's a lot of ways. Certainly our coaching staff takes a lot of responsibility for being guys that are, in a position where we can help our players feel like they can be their authentic selves, which is only going to drive their performance, right? Anybody who's nervous to show up to practice, uncomfortable to be in a team setting because of anything that's going on in the world with them or with their teammates or whatever, they're never going to reach their max potential. And so as a staff, we work really hard on how do we break those walls down? How do we help our guys learn that everybody on our team's got a story and that we've all got to learn to get to know each other? But I think the second big part of that is not only, yes, it is our staff's responsibility. Yes, it is our professors' responsibility and our strength coaches. It's all of the leaders and adults in the program. But I think the fascinating thing has been to try to put a little bit of responsibility on our players, right? If we want to have a safe culture and a safe place, we got to have every guy in our program be mature enough to allow others to go on their journey without, putting them down or making them feel uncomfortable as they're trying to navigate who they want to be. And so we spend a lot of time challenging our guys like, hey, you got to become self-secure, right? We don't want to be insecure, which is maybe the number one killer of any athlete moving forward. So we've got to become self-secure so we can allow our teammates to grow too.
Yeah, and I want to spend some time here because that's what I brag about your team all the time and the culture that they have, and it's so much that we wouldn't even need to be in the weight room, and these players, they're not going to skip reps, they're not going to cheat in, they're going to push themselves. And when we first started, that really wasn't where it was at. Doesn't mean they were lazy, but these guys, they are so secure, and they do know what they need to do, and they're not too worried about not looking good in front of the guy in front of them or anything like that, and something that has been crazy to me with you and again has helped change me so much is that every little thing you do has a purpose. When you watch, when you come down and talk, when you're up on the treadmill, when you don't come to it, you'll let me know. You have a purpose for everything, and how does that come? Is that kind of like the night before? Is that, hey, this week I know when I'm going to push him, I know how you know that you can't be in front of him too much, you know that you need to be in front of him more. How do you come up with that process, man? Because those little things, I don't know if we can quantify it or measure that, but that's what makes your team and this Yotes program that you've built that's had 6 conference losses in 6 years, to me, so special. Where does that come from?
Yeah. If I knew the answer, I would. I'd write a book, and we'd be both, be on a tour right now. But that's a great question. One thing I've found a lot of confidence is I spend a lot of time reflecting, and it's as much time as I spend in front of our team. I spend just as much time reflecting, whether that be even at home just watching TV at night, I'm still thinking about our team. And so one thing in reflection that I've really, come to love is that I'm constantly trying to figure out where are we at as a team, where is every individual at as a team, based on the principles of what I want our program to be. I want people to have a great mentality. I want people to be able to create a safe place, things like that. And so constantly making decisions based on where are we at with those things, right? If I think potentially maybe as a team we're not, that we're not as tough as we need to be at that moment or on that week or that day, then I'm certainly going to bring that presence to that practice or that weights or to that team event, right? But sometimes I think they need a break from me too. And so then there are days where I choose, because one thing that we talk about a lot is when we are in a team setting, we are going to demand your absolute best. And that could be literally just doing a book review. Like we're going to do a book review today on David Goggins that we read over the summer. And I'm going to demand our team's best because that's the mentality we want every time that we're together. But because I know that I also need to give them some breaks at times. And so there's times where I'll, what I like to say, just disappear, let them be themselves for a little while, create that safe place, and then, get back to it. But so basically, I'm just constantly trying to figure out where do I think we're at? Where do we need to go? Sometimes that's a long-term projection. Sometimes that's a 24-hour projection. Right. But it's just a lot of reflection.
It kind of looks to me from an outside as an obsession, in a good way, But I've always wondered, is your obsession more towards basketball, or is it more towards the coaching side, more towards like seeing the way that you do all these little things? I feel like you could do it in any avenue. I think you could go dominate a business. I think you could, if you learn the schematics of another sport, just the little things that you implement, it's probably a combination of both, but that obsession that you have to where it's like every little thing matters all the time. I've never seen you off. I didn't talk to you the few days after the national championship. Maybe that's when I didn't see it, but I've never seen you off, you know what I mean? And it's incredible to see, where does that obsession come from and or is it not obsession,
Sure. Yeah. Well, ever since the 7th grade, I knew I wanted to be a college basketball coach. Like, I've been dialed in since.
Tell me that story then.
Yeah. Well, my sister, local athlete here, 2001 state player of the year at Boise High. Her name was Colby Blaine. Excellent player. Got recruited by a lot of big schools, and so I got to see that process. We had in-home visits. We had tours of schools. I was the little brother, always asking, what shoe company you guys with. I was asking the important questions, I became fascinated with like the professionalism and the community support and those types of things. And so I fell in love with coaching. My dad also was a high school coach, so I grew up in the gym. He was a high school coach at Boise High for a long, long time. And so that's kind of where the love of coaching came from. But I think, it's been the last 5, 10, 15 years that have actually shifted. What is it that I actually want to achieve as a coach? When I was in 7th grade, I think it was wins and losses, right? It was coaching at the biggest program you can coach at. That's really changed. I think what I've noticed over, specifically the last couple of years of getting to be a head coach is I've really enjoyed my journey of becoming more confident. And confidence comes from experiences, and it comes from making changes and becoming the best version of yourself. And I really am becoming confident in who I am and what I'm able to accomplish, right? And so what that's actually done to me is I've become convicted with how can I help others get this same enjoyment that I'm getting, right? And so, yes, I am a basketball coach of 16 student athletes at College of Idaho, but I'm actually more interested in teaching them how do you get this confidence, right? How do you enjoy your life? Because I can see every year I'm starting to enjoy mine, more and more. And so, yeah, we're teaching them offense and defense, but really I'm fascinated with how do we teach them how to enjoy their life.
Give me some examples of that, because to me it comes back to you weren't as confident, so you had the insecurities before.
Sure.
But instead of running away from them, you did something to overcome them. Did you know that you were doing that at the time, or? Give me some examples maybe of how you've kind of navigated to become this confident.
Sure. Well, I think, one thing you said you've always seen me on, right? And one thing I've always enjoyed about life is I believe there's a solution to everything, right? Like my mentality, my ideology on life is like if something's not going right, I'm not going to play the victim card. We can fix this, right? Whether it be trying to pass my math class or win a basketball game or buy a house, whatever it might be in your life, right? Like you can find a solution. I think my dad was a coach and he had a great mentality. And so, one thing that he always fired me up with when I was a kid, he challenged me a lot. And I always wanted to show him I could do it before he even asked or before, I always wanted to do it on my own, right? And so I've just learned since being a kid that you can find a solution to everything. And so that's kind of fired me up. Along this journey for sure.
I love it.
Yeah. That's
awesome.
It's kind of where it's come from.
So let's go kind of to how you create your process for the year, to where let's go after this year because it's unique. This is a tough one for both of us because we're coming off a national championship and we have almost everybody returning, When did the process start? So we won the national championship. You give me the story on how much time you took off.
Yeah.
When did it start, and what does your process look like as far as mapping out this next year?
Sure. Well, we do want to celebrate, and we always want to enjoy the journey. And that's something I think that our program is continuing to do better and better every year is like we want to enjoy it. And we're learning that with maturity, we can enjoy it, and we can drive the mentality we need. Like we don't have to be miserable every day. I think a lot of teams misplace misery and think that that's, focus. But we won the national championship on March 18th. We ended up leaving the next day and had some events around town, and it was 8 days later, so that would have been March 26th. I remember texting my staff and telling them, hey, we got University of Providence on the first game. We got to get going. November 4th is not that far away. So I knew at that moment, that yes, the national championship is the goal, but honestly, it's, we talk about it all the time on our team. We're not chasing the win. We're chasing the feeling of success, the feeling of doing it together, right? That's literally what we're chasing. And because we chase that, I think, we get the results in terms of wins and losses. And so, boom, 8 days later, I was ready to start chasing that feeling again. And so, definitely had a good spring, got right back in the weight room. I did talk to a couple of our leaders. I really was fascinated with this. I came back and was immediately thinking, we got to have a new motto. We got to do something different. They have to be fired up. They're going to be complacent. And after talking to two of our leaders, they literally said, paraphrasing, but they literally said, Coach, stay out of our way. We got this. Yeah. We are who we are. We are who we need to be. We're going to continue to get better and mature, but literally don't get in our way unless you really think you got to correct us. And I was like, all right, I love this. So I spent the summertime just kind of trying to discover what can I do to help them. We got back into reading books. We do that as a team every summer, so we read our book and really just tried to continue to grow myself so that I can be mentally ready for the season, I'm really excited to get going with them.
Yeah, I remember I came in kind of almost in a mini panic, like, Coach, we're going to be complacent. We got to figure this out. What are we going to do? How are we going to push them? And you told me to calm down.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey,
Sure.
They got it.
Yeah.
They got it. We're going to be good. And we were talking last night in the weight room. It's tricky for me to figure out what I need to change. It's like, why wouldn't I do the exact same thing I did last year?
Yeah.
But I know that we still need to get better.
Yeah, it makes you feel insecure as a coach if you're not driving the bus.
Right.
But that bus can drive so much faster when you got your players, all driving it together. And
Right.
So we're dealing with those insecurities of like, am I doing enough to make sure we're ready?
So are you creating a vision, like the long term? Is your vision, hey, national championship? Or are you day by day, like at the beginning of the year, you're like, okay, same thing, toughest team wins, we're here, this is our vision, and then we backtrack it? Or how do you kind of go about setting that process? There's so many different ways to set goals and do things like that. What's your system?
Yeah, well, my first couple of years, to be honest with you, I was afraid of setting goals. Because I thought, what if we don't meet them? Is that failure, right? And so we were really just super present in the moment, and we tried that kind of approach. But to be honest with you, it wasn't necessarily me, and so I don't know that I connected my energy with it. And so after doing some research after COVID, and you were actually the one who really helped us, you got us back into goal setting, and I saw the excitement and the re-energized souls of our guys when we did just like a 4-week challenge, right? Just partner people up and make them, set a tough goal and see if they can accomplish it, right?
Put it on the whiteboard.
Yeah, put it on the whiteboard. And so I really saw how that changed us just in a short amount of time. So I said, okay, as a team, we're going to talk about our goals. Like, we're going to have the biggest goals out there. If you don't talk about it, it can't become real, right? So last year we did, in the last 2 or 3 years, we have been talking about national champions. Right, and what we do once we set that goal is now we have to move backwards, and we have to figure out who do we need to become to actually achieve that. And so it's funny you ask now, like, well, is it the same goal? Well, the truth is, I want to take the goal to another step, like another level. In the David Goggins books that we're reading, one of his ideologies on, how does he keep moving forward is he always says to himself, well, what if? What if I could be the baddest dude that ever lived? Like, what if I could, set the world record and be the guy who nobody can beat? And so we honestly, yes, we do want to win the national championship, but with this group right now, what if we could be the most dominant NAIA program to ever play? Like, what if these guys can literally set the record books in a place where they can't ever be touched? And you might catch some flack in society about being arrogant about that stuff, but at the end of the day, our 20 guys are all moving in the same direction, and they want to be those things, right? And so we set the goal high, and then we got to move backwards again. Who do we need to become if we want to achieve those goals, if we want to be the most dominant program to ever play in the NAIA? And so now we're just trying to discover who is it that we need to be, right?
Yeah, I love it. That's a heavy hitter for me right there. With that, you're talking about who we need to be. One of the best slogans I've ever heard or I've seen on a T-shirt is you guys, you came up with toughest team wins, and you hear that actually a lot, but we believed it, and those guys believe it. And we've had guys that were a little younger when we first had them, and they weren't the toughest guys in the world. Now it was literally we were the toughest team, to where you're in the national championship, we're in the Final Four. Every single announcer is talking about how tough we are. Like it's like not even fair for the other team, Why that slogan? Was it Goggins or was that something else? And then how did you embody that, and how did you create that with everybody within the team? And I know it's been a process, but how have you gotten it?
Yeah, well, we have heard it in a lot of areas. You hear it, from a lot of programs, toughest team,
but we lived it.
But correct, we lived it, right? And I think the reason why we've connected with it, and maybe why I've really pushed it, with putting it in print on shirts and wearing it at specific times, is because it matches our ideology on mentality, right? That's the number one thing you want to develop if you want a championship team. I'm not just talking about a good team, I'm talking about a championship team. You have to develop a tough mentality, which a lot of society right now would say that's the old school coaching. That's the Bobby Knight, and it's really uncomfortable for people. But we can't forget that we have to be tough, right? And so I think what's been fun with that slogan is that we've defined what does toughness actually mean. You got a guy like Samaje Morgan, who is an incredible freshman last year for us, really closes out a bunch of big games in the national tournament, and he's never lifted a weight before he's come to us as a freshman last September. So is he not tough because he hasn't lifted weights? He learned that he could be tough in other areas, which obviously we got him stronger in the weight room. But, our Sweet 16 game against LSU Shreveport, we're up 18 points in the first half, and there's a loose ball in the backcourt, and a Shreveport player decided to jog, and he decided to sprint it down, and we get a wide-open layup for Caden Handren, right? That was tough. He chose in that moment that I'm going to sprint, and I'm going to beat this guy for that ball. Had nothing to do with what we might consider the weight room or that type of stuff of toughness. And so we've taken toughness beyond just its basic concept. Toughness is showing up and practicing when you're tired. Toughness is, being a good teammate when something's not going on with your life. Toughness is asking for help when you're down, right?
Yeah.
When you're having a hard day or a hard time, because it happens to all of us, and a lot of people just don't want to talk about it, it's tough to walk in there and say, Coach, I really need some help.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I think we've gotten as a program. And so toughest team does win because it's a lot more than just, one thing.
And the two reasons that we've already talked about were the reasons why I wanted you to come on here. The toughest team wins, and that mentality and how you push them so hard. The Bobby Knight, but then how we started creating a safe place. I think about it in business, like with my coaches too, to where it might be something that I used to do, but I've never even taught them, and then I don't see them do it, and I want to coach them, but instead I'll mother F them, or I won't treat it the right way, you know what I mean? And it's I'm not creating a safe place. Yeah. Or other times I'll create a safe place, and then they figure out and get there on their own, and then they take way more responsibility, and we have way more success, and seeing we've worked with thousands of teams through the years, but with the dozen teams that we work with right now, we have some phenomenal coaches and some that aren't. Sometimes it's almost, lack of a better term, too soft or too hard, sure. And then trying to find that into where this year we don't even have to talk to the guys. They're like, we got this, because they are the toughest, baddest dudes I've ever worked with as a group of 16 guys, which is crazy. The two new guys coming in, how fast they've had to come along because of the culture they're in, that balance that you have between those two is your gift, which is really, I appreciate being a part of your journey and learning this from you, because you've helped not just me coaching, but again, my business and everything. So it's amazing to see, man.
Sure. Well,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
So let's take that into culture, because culture is a huge word. I use it all the time. I say that's the difference between us and any other training facility in the country, because I feel like it's the guys that we have. I feel like it's when somebody walks in, the presence that we have, and we know everybody's name and we love them, but everybody thinks they have a great culture. But like you said, not to be a good team, but to be a championship team, the best team, you have to have a phenomenal culture, and yours, to me, is the toughest team wins. But how do you think about culture? Maybe something that we haven't talked about already, but how do you put all that together and create this, over 6 years you've changed, and I've seen it, and I've always thought every year it was phenomenal, but even this year, how you're handling success, putting that all together, what does culture mean to you, and how have you nurtured that?
Yeah, biggest word in America, right? And we all use it. We all want a good culture, and
right.
And as we've continued to develop ours over the last couple of years, and a compliment to Scott Garson, my predecessor, my former boss, he laid the foundation for a great culture here at the College of Idaho. And when I got the job 6 years ago, I didn't want to change what he did. I just wanted to grow on it, right? And I think we've grown tremendously. I think one thing that we've really come to terms with in the last maybe just 2 years is that we want to enjoy a great experience. And so what does that actually look like, feel like? And we've come to the word vibe, V-I-B-E, right? We want, everybody, on your best nights with your best friends, whether it be watching a high school game or hanging out at a restaurant or, whatever, watching the Super Bowl, you're hanging out with people that you want to vibe with. And how else do you explain that word? It's just people you feel safe with, people you can joke and laugh with, you can get the best of life out of. And so as we've built our culture, we've really built it around that word. We want to vibe with people, right? And so one thing we do is we really spend a lot of time in our recruiting process trying to find people that want to vibe with us. As much as we want to vibe with them, we want them to vibe with us too. when you get new people in your program, you don't expect them to be ready-made, right? There's things they need to learn and a process they need to go about, especially when you have an age difference from freshmen to seniors and, the leaders of coaching staff or other people that we let into the program. So there are things to learn, but we really try to put a lot of emphasis on who are people who are interested in learning how to vibe together with us. And I think that's been a big part of building our culture. And so what does a person that can vibe in our program look like? That's somebody who is completely selfless. If you look at our stats, nobody played more than 25 minutes a game last year. Nobody scored more than 12 points a game. Nobody plays the minutes they want. We share all the stats, right? Like, it's just how we do it. We share all the glory. Like, there's guys that made the all-conference team and guys that didn't that should have. Like, and our kind of motto is like, if you get that, we get that.
Yep.
And that's not just a motto. Like, that's genuinely who these people are that are in our program. That's who we've become, right? And so I think we've really tried to just find that vibe, and that's what strengthened our culture. And it continues to develop. What can our culture be? Like you're talking about what this team looks like this year so far, in the weight room and all that. This team's going to take our culture to another level. It's going to continue to, I don't want to say redefine, but, define even more of what is actually possible,
Yeah, and for people listening, the vibe is what makes another reason why you guys are so special. You come into a workout with us at 6 a.m. and the guys are echoing the warm-up. We're getting as many high fives as we possibly can get in there. It's crazy. It gets me juiced up. I talk to all my coaches. You got to come see it. Now Wyatt's been out there, and now with the girls basketball program, their vibe has increased so much. Even with how I handle my warm ups with any team that I have now. What I mean? Because it's like those little things, and like you said, that I love the word vibe, and especially the kids these days will love the word vibe. But that's exactly what it is. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I think something that's tough for anyone to deal with is success, and I think it comes back to insecurities, because once you have it, now you have that expectation to where it's like, oh, you fell off, or oh, they got lucky, oh, that was cool, you worked hard and then you didn't do it, oh, it's a one-time deal. You've had a lot of success now for a while, and we've had athletes that have had a lot of success, and I don't feel like it has gotten to their heads. I don't feel like it has slowed us down. How do we go about handling success? Because that's a tricky one.
Oh, yeah.
Especially,
sure.
I mean, how many teams go back-to-back? Super, super rare. Or even have a good year the next year,
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that? Not just this national championship, but through the whole 6 years.
Yeah. Well, it's the challenge we all want in our own lives, right? Like, not everybody gets to feel this type of pressure. Like, what a cool opportunity, right? I mean, 0.01% of the people in the world get to feel a pressure of repeating and sustaining number one in the country, that type of stuff. But like we talk about with our team, I use the word society a lot. Right before we might be playing our crosstown rivals in NU, and I tell our guys, society has made this a big game, right? They make this rivalry game a big game. It's another basketball game for us, right? Another challenge. And so what we're doing with that message is we're helping our guys understand that, or not understand, but just kind of redefining what does success actually mean. And we've really become comfortable understanding and believing that results will come if we define success with our process, right? Like, communications first. Building trust is extremely important. Being tough, right? If we'll dive into those things, then we don't need to figure out how to win. And I know that sounds corny, but it's the truth. True. We will win if we dive into the things that success demands. I think the important thing that we do to continue to move forward is we don't move past the things that have helped us build us into the men that we have become and that we need to become, which, again, I'll say those words: communication, trust, commitment. Those are big staples in our program. And so we keep finding ways to implement those into our program. Maybe it's a different way of, communicating, playing catchphrase before practice or doing a little team activity. You can always change the way you communicate, but we need to keep communicating with each other, because that's going to help develop us, which is going to bring success, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. And with success, there still comes, and with the athletes, especially in this day and age, mental health is huge, and it's always been there, but just the way people talk about it. And it's hard for me to talk about, and I've heard you handle it, how, when you're dealing with depression and failure and mental health with your athletes or your coaches or yourself or people around you, how this comes back to like the gift that you have. And I don't even know if you know that you're doing it, but to where you're pushing people so hard and holding them to a certain standard, but at the same time, you are creating a safe place. You are loving them up. How do you navigate that? And then you just talk about it to where it doesn't feel uncomfortable. If somebody's even talking about suicide or somebody's talking about anything, like it doesn't feel uncomfortable when you talk about it, and it is a lot of times uncomfortable in other environments,
Sure.
How do you go about with that?
I think, I've really realized in my coaching journey over the last couple of years, but I think our teams realize, like, we're a better team when we're able to communicate that we have these difficulties, right? When we are able to share with our team that, hey, I am having some hard times right now, whether it just be a couple dark days of depression or maybe it is some suicidal thoughts or it's having a really hard time with some family issues going on. There's divorce, there's sickness, there's death, right? Unfortunately, people get older in the world, your grandparents, and so we experience that every year. And we have found that we actually get closer and more together when we're able to share that stuff with each other. And really, it's the bravery of a lot of our guys on our team, former players who have shared things, who then you hear from a teammate a year later who will say, hey, if it wasn't for so-and-so telling me their story, I wouldn't have felt as comfortable as I did last year with this team. And now I'm ready to tell you my story. It might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, but we've had former players that are opening the door for that. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned with having those tough conversations is just because you have those tough conversations about mental health, suicide, death, all that, doesn't mean that you have to, do away with being tough. Like, they go together, right? And
right.
I think I say young people because I work with young people, but I think every human being in this world wants to be loved. They want to be challenged. The way to show that you care about them is to show them what they're capable of becoming. So, I might have a guy on our team who's having a hard time, and I'll empathize with them about their situation, but then I'll promise them that I'm not gonna lay off the gas because they're capable of, becoming more than they are right now. Just because they're having a hard time going doesn't mean that I'm just going to lay off the gas. And I really do think that that's appreciated by the guys that we have in our program and the people that we're around.
I love that. Well, another mentor of mine has always said that every human has something deep in them that actually they want to be held accountable. Yeah. You need somebody to hold you accountable, and you want that, and that's what I see with you, and I think just hearing you talk about that, when you have your fears, it's, facing them and communicating them, it's going to help you overcome them a lot more instead of running away from them, and being vulnerable, which is so hard to do, especially this day and age where everything is seen. Everything's on social media. Everybody can see everything. It's hard for somebody to talk about that they are going through a hard time, or because you do have to act tough. Yeah. But watching this group of guys do it, where they're literally the toughest guys I've ever been around, and now you can see the success they have. It's crazy to see the difference it makes.
Sure.
It's pretty awesome.
Well, we have kind of a little quote in our program. You got to run to the fire, right? Wherever the fires are, you got to run to them. But to run to them and put them out, you got to be vulnerable. And I think our guys they're starting to find that there's toughness in that. There's toughness to addressing the hard things and then being vulnerable enough to figure out, how do I put this fire out? Like, that's tough, not just grabbing a rebound or diving on the loose ball. And I actually think our guys are starting to get really inspired by what else can I take care of in my own life that's going to help me really enjoy my life? What fires can I put out? And they're running to them.
I'm thinking about that right now with myself. Like, in business too, it's easy to where I'm going to go tackle these 3 things that are easier for me, which are still issues.
Sure.
Because I don't want to go handle something that's new or could really, change us, or we could lose money, or things aren't going to go well. But every time that I go attack those, I feel like everything compounds way better.
100%.
And running to the fire, I love it. The more I hear from you, the more I talk with anybody, the more I kind of see working with my athletes. I think communication is huge, and not just with other people. I think with yourself too. And we were just talking off camera a little bit, to where communication about the things that make you feel uncomfortable, or the things that you're scared of, even just talking about them, and then when you attack them, it's like it's stacking those little confidence pieces that's going to help it even more and more, because then I used to be scared to do that. I did it, and didn't go great. Learn from it. I'm going to do it again now here, and then you start building that confidence on those uncomfortable things. I think that communication is, and again, it's kind of come up from this conversation, I think is probably the number one thing, with yourself and with others.
You make a hard case for that. There's no question. It's funny, like when we got together this year, the first team activity we did was talking about becoming aware of who are we now, who do we want to be in 6 months or 6 years from now, and figuring out how do I communicate to myself, and so we all talked about as a team, like the individual. We didn't talk about how we're going to build our team chemistry yet. Not on August 23rd when we had our first team meeting. We talked about how do I communicate with myself, because if I don't have a good relationship with myself, I'm not going to be a good vibe for the team. Right, and I might be, but that's just going to be a fake, won't be an authentic connection with the team. Right. And so, I think a lot of teams are like, let's build chemistry, and so they do a team activity. Well, in my mind, if we want to have a great team chemistry, we got to have the most secure individuals. So we got to learn how to communicate to ourselves, right? And how do we drive ourselves? How do we create a safe place with ourselves?
I think that's it. My most frustrating thing that I see with young athletes is they are scared to go as hard as they possibly can because they're scared of losing.
Sure.
And I've always had a struggle of figuring out how to get them to go push that and realize that there's so much enjoyment, so much success if you actually went and did that. If you went as hard as you possibly could and you lost, you're going to feel 10 times better than going 80% and being okay, well, it wasn't me. I coach didn't put me in, or I could have went harder.
Yep.
Like, that's my biggest frustration, and communication is something I haven't talked about it much, and I've been communicating with them, but I'm going to try to work that to where they're communicating with themselves, acknowledging that I am scared to go as hard as I can because this person in the stands, or because dad's on my ass, or coach is on my ass, right?
Yep.
I think that's a huge piece for me. So, big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Coach, man, I really appreciate literally the last 4 or 5 years with you. You've changed the trajectory of myself off the field, my employees. I mean, you've had a huge impact on so many people outside of just the guys on your basketball teams. And I always tell you, wherever you go, I'm coming with. And I know, don't tell Rossi and College of Idaho that, but I know you're really an amazing coach, man, and I appreciate everything.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. It takes a village, right? Your business, our journey in life, it takes a village. And so I'm just a small piece of it. At the end of the day, everybody's just a little small piece of it. But, we all stick together. We can keep enjoying it. So let's keep this thing rolling.
Yes, sir. Let's run it back.
Oh, man.